Hey folks, Shortfuse the Cybernik. If you've not heard of him, I don't blame you. In the 1990s, the UK was graced with Sonic the Comic, an awesome comic book that followed the adventures of Sonic, Tails, Amy and Knuckles in their eternal struggle against the evil Dr. Robotnik. It was published by Fleetway, and its most popular character is probably the evil version of Super Sonic, who has since had Fleetway bestowed on him as a nickname. In truth though, the British comics, just like the Archie comics, the IDW comics, French comics, and various manga volumes, introduced a whole pack of new characters separate from the games who exclusively appeared in the world of Fleetway's Sonic the Comic. One of the more popular original characters was the armoured warrior Shortfuse the Cybernik, best described as Sonic the Comic's answer to Marvel's Iron Man. With a high-tech and indestructible suit of armour, Shortfuse made an immediate impact on readers of Sonic the Comic, and would go on to grace multiple covers and have dozens of pieces of fan art showcased in the comic's pages. I'd go so far as to say Shortfuse was probably Fleetway's most popular original character in the 90s. But who exactly is Shortfuse? How did he get his armour? Is he a goodie or a baddie? Strap in as I attempt to answer all of those questions and take you through the entire, somewhat tragic story of Shortfuse the Cybernik. The very first Shortfuse story is from issue 45 in a strip titled Enter the Cybernik. We get introduced to Shorty the Squirrel, a passionate resident of Emerald Hill Zone with a real temper. Shorty is arguing with another critter at the start of the story who claims that Robotnik is an okay guy. Mid-argument, a raid on Emerald Hill Zone is initiated by Robotnik's trooper robots, who round up Shorty's friends and take them on board their ship. Shorty manages to escape and infiltrates the ship, hoping to save his friends. Inside, we get to see the badnik making process, and Robotnik and his sidekick Grimer can be seen hooking up unconscious animals inside the shells of badniks. It really drives home how horrible Robotnik is. The brave Shorty the Squirrel has seen enough. He dives out of cover and attempts to destroy Robotnik's lab, but unfortunately he's a pretty puny little animal. He's easily apprehended by Robotnik. Admiring Shorty's spunk, Robotnik decides to stuff him into the shell of the first ever super badnik, called a Cybernik, a more powerful variant of the usual badniks. The first part ends with the horrifying face of Shorty as he's wired up inside this Cybernik shell. The story continued in issue 47, which features Shorty right there on the cover. We pick up with Robotnik explaining that, unlike normal badniks, there's no way to release animals from a Cybernik, so Shorty will be trapped in his armour forever once the process is complete. The final step of the transformation is to blast Shorty with some sort of device to brainwash him, making him subservient and mindless. When this is done, Shorty is tasked with his first mission, to lead an assault of his former home of Emerald Hill Zone. Shorty obliges, leading a band of badniks there. When they arrive though, Shorty blasts the badniks into oblivion, freeing the animals inside, who are, incidentally, his former buddies. As it turns out, he managed to resist the brainwashing process and postulates that it might have been a mixture of his own rugged determination and the damage he did to Robotnik's lab that allowed him to retain his own consciousness. The final part of this origin story opens up with a furious Robotnik making his way to Emerald Hill Zone. After learning of Shorty's rebellion, he wants to deal with the Cybernik himself. When he gets there, he finds Shorty, who puts up a good fight. Shorty has the ability of flight, can fire off blasts from cannons in his arms, and has great defense due to his chunky robotic armor. Robotnik does have a contingency plan, a small device that he uses to short-circuit Shorty's armor. The device is incredibly effective, but just as Robotnik gets the upper hand, good old Sonic turns up to smash Robotnik and save the day. Shorty crushes the device, eradicating his one weakness. The story ends with Sonic extending an invite for Shorty to join the Freedom Fighters, but declaring himself a loner with a personal vendetta against Robotnik, Shorty declines and flies off, giving himself the new nickname, Shortfuse the Cybernik. The next Shortfuse story was a one-off titled Knuckles vs. the Cybernik. Taking place shortly after the events of Sonic and Knuckles, the story starts with Shortfuse chasing a badnik to the floating island. Enraged at the sight of robots invading his island home again, Knuckles lashes out and attacks Shortfuse. The two scrap a little, while Shortfuse tries to explain to Knuckles that he isn't on Robotnik's side. Knuckles is finally convinced when Shortfuse helps to dispatch some badniks. The two share a handshake before Shortfuse takes off again to Mobius. This story was worth a mention because, as loners with short tempers, I think Knuckles and Shortfuse are quite similar. Next up we have the Rampage of Metanik. In this story, Robotnik unleashes his newest creation, Mechanik, on the citizens of Stone Tower Zone. Mechanik is a giant Godzilla-style robot dinosaur who starts laying waste to the zone while Robotnik smugly watches on a monitor. Mechanik is so big that even when Sonic turns up to help, he finds himself powerless to stop him. Shortfuse also arrives on the scene to help. He agrees to team up with Sonic and the Freedom Fighters and they launch a combined attack. Shortfuse flies into the air and launches Sonic at Mechanik's head, but disaster strikes. The fierce Mechanik seems to incinerate Shortfuse with his flame breath. Of course, in part 2 of the story, it's revealed that Shortfuse is in fact not burnt to a crisp. He gets his wits about him enough to save Sonic from being eaten. A cocky Sonic and angry Shortfuse exchange some heated words, with Sonic arrogantly refusing to accept that Shortfuse saved him from certain death. Sonic forms a genius plan to bring down the hulking dinosaur. He asks Shortfuse to fire his blasters in a single spot. Shortfuse's blasters heat up Mechanik's ankles, allowing Sonic to spin dash through the heated metal and tear Mechanik's inner wirings to shreds, bringing the menace to an end. As usual, Shortfuse ends the story by bidding everyone adieu and flying off. Now next up we have one of Shortfuse's most substantial solo adventures, a really important story titled Cybernik Strikes Back. Off on his own adventure, Shortfuse goes and finds more of Robotnik's goons to destroy. He strikes a group of trooper robots and frees their Mobian prisoners. One of the prisoners is another beloved Fleetway character called Tekno the Canary, who would go on to be a close friend of Amy's. Shortfuse explains his backstory to Tekno, something that would become a bit of a recurring joke in the comics. Tekno reveals that she's an engineer, and Shortfuse reveals that he already knew that, and freed her specifically so that she could develop him a bomb to blow up the highly pollutant chemical plant zone. The duo head to Tekno's secret lab. She tells Shortfuse that she used to be one of Robotnik's top engineers, but she was caught stealing materials and was ordered to be enslaved. Tekno agrees to help out by making a bomb, but also says that she can help to upgrade Shortfuse's armor. It's made of a super metal called Megatal, kind of like adamantium or vibranium, a substance that Tekno actually helped to create. This is the result of Tekno's improvements. This is kind of like Shortfuse Mark II with the red and black details. What a massive improvement. The two go to Chemical Plant Zone and plant their bomb with a 5-minute countdown. One of the comic's main baddies turns up on Robotnik's behalf to ruin their plans, the shapeshifter Metamorphia. Metamorphia proves to be quite the formidable foe, matching Shortfuse's abilities with her various different hideous forms. The two end up fighting until the bomb timer reaches 0 and explodes. Part 2 of the story ends with the Cybernik sinking into the waters below the zone with heaps of debris crushing him. Fearing he may drown, Shortfuse uses his jet boots to free himself, and assuming that Metamorphia took Tekno to Robotnik, heads to Robotnik's citadel. The story ends with Shortfuse going full badass. He storms into the citadel, decimates all of the robots, and successfully rescues Tekno. Robotnik, now facing defeat, actually eggs Shortfuse on, daring Shortfuse to fire a shot at him and finish him off. Shortfuse refuses to end Robotnik. Why? Well, in his own words, "You'll suffer more if I let you live. Each time I triumph over your badniks, you'll remember one thing. You created me, which makes you responsible for your own defeats." The story ends with Shortfuse and Tekno flying off. Tekno offers Shortfuse to use her lab as his secret base, but ever the loner, he declines the offer and goes off on his own. Now you'll have to excuse me for retreading some material here, but Shortfuse next appears to take on Commander Brutus, another of Robotnik's creations that went rogue. Man, Robotnik sure had a knack for creating robots that wanted to kick his ass. Shortfuse and Sonic are the two main protagonists who try to stop Brutus when he leads an army of badniks in an assault of Metropolis Zone. If you want to hear more about that, please check out my video on Commander Brutus. For the purposes of a profile of Shortfuse, however, it's worth mentioning that the mighty Commander Brutus actually gets the better of Shortfuse every time they clash, proving himself to be the strongest of Robotnik's creations. Shortfuse does prove useful in the struggle by freeing freedom fighter Johnny Lightfoot after he's been roboticized by Brutus. As it turns out, neither Shortfuse nor Sonic is responsible for ending Brutus's onslaught, but Dr. Robotnik is. Like I said, check the video if you want to know more about that. There's a period of time in the comic where Sonic disappears from Mobius into the special stage for quite some time. During this period, Shortfuse actually decides to briefly join the Freedom Fighters. He first joins the team in issue 89, after helping Amy, Tails and Johnny take on a troop of badniks. Shortfuse realizes he'd be a really big asset to the Freedom Fighters in Sonic's absence. But, kind of like the Incredible Hulk in the original Avengers, Shortfuse is destined to clash with some of the other members of the Freedom Fighters. In the next issue, tensions are already starting to build between Shortfuse and Amy, the de facto leader of the Freedom Fighters in Sonic's absence. Some information fed to the gang by one of Robotnik's agents leads them to attacking a gaggle of troops. Shortfuse is really hasty to get stuck in and start destroying some robots, so he charges in without anybody else's consent, which really annoys Amy. By the way, British comic fans, does this panel remind you of anything? Anyway, the robots were hiding a secret weapon called Vermin, who is actually another Cybernik. Vermin has been engineered to be even stronger than Shortfuse. When the two fight, Vermin uses his tail to inject a computer virus into Shortfuse's armor, incapacitating him. Vermin looks like he'll be able to take down all of the Freedom Fighters, but Amy Rose manages to fend him off by shooting an acidic fruit just above him, which oozes all over Vermin and forces him to flee. Fortunately, Tekno is able to assist Shortfuse and get rid of the computer virus, but his actions have already alienated Amy. Shortfuse remains part of the Freedom Fighters for a couple more stories. In a Christmas issue, he destroys a heat ray satellite put into orbit by Robotnik, and then a few issues later, the gang end up disturbing a monstrous dragon from its slumber when expanding their secret underground base. Amy, noting that the gang were the ones who disturbed the dragon in the first place, has to step in to stop Shortfuse aggressively going on the attack. The whole dragon problem is resolved peacefully in the end, but the Freedom Fighters emerge from the story worried about Shortfuse's temperament. Things really come to a head in the story Boiling Point, when on a covert mission to liberate some Mobians from Chemical Plant Zone, Shortfuse spots his old adversary Vermin and flies into a rage, charging into battle early and without consenting with his team again. The results of this are nearly disastrous, as Johnny Lightfoot nearly falls into a vat of acid before he's saved by Tails. Shortfuse is tough enough to force Vermin to retreat this time, but he gets chewed out by Amy for his actions. He was rash, aggressive, and quite callous, saying that he valued defeating Vermin over saving Johnny. The argument is enough to see Shortfuse officially leave the Freedom Fighters to continue on his own. This is where things get kind of bizarre. There's a world-altering storyline in the comics in which evil Supersonic unleashes an electromagnetic pulse that effectively destroys all of Robotnik's robots, rendering him defeated. Shortfuse, being a creation of Robotnik's, was also affected by the blast. He falls into hot lava and solidifies into a rock statue. He's discovered months later by the Freedom Fighters. When he's freed, he's dismayed to find that Robotnik has finally been defeated, leaving him purposeless and still trapped in his armor. In lieu of being a hero to save the world, Shortfuse tries his hand at a few normal jobs, working as a window salesman, a fry cook, and an actor in a commercial. They don't leave him very fulfilled. Shortfuse very conveniently finds some purpose when Sonic's help is requested on a faraway planet via a mysterious portal. With no Sonic there to respond, Shortfuse offers to hop through the portal to help instead, making it seem to his friends like he disappeared from Mobius without a trace. Tekno cares about Shortfuse deeply, and when pondering his whereabouts, develops a piece of rather creepy technology that her and Amy use to locate him. They're transported far away to an alien spacecraft where they see him and he proceeds to attack them. Has Shortfuse finally gone bad? He's been enslaved by an alien emperor, Dark Visor. Remind you of anyone? He's attached some sort of device to Shortfuse's chest and turned him into a mindless war machine. The device is a little creature called a controller crawly, kind of like a brain slug from Futurama. Once removed, Shortfuse is back to normal again. Dark Visor's ship is attacked by the ship of another race of aliens who have been in a centuries-old war with Dark Visor's people. Everyone crash lands on a planet inhabited by peaceful aliens, and Shortfuse, Amy, and Tekno get to act as intermediaries in bringing peace to the centuries-old conflicts between Dark Visor and the other aliens. At the conclusion of the story, Shortfuse resolves that he's gonna stay on this planet far, far away, inhabited by a race of benevolent aliens. Shortfuse has a belief that they might be able to free him from his shell. His alien adventures come to an end a few issues later when he returns to Mobius for Christmas. As it turns out, the aliens have successfully installed a release program on his armor, meaning that Shorty can take it off and put it on at will. Heroically though, he has to sacrifice this perk quite soon afterwards, when doing battle with arch-nemesis Vermin. So Vermin is on the attack once again, and Shortfuse encourages Vermin to use his piercing tail. He positively dares Vermin to stab him again. Vermin obliges, but this time around, the armor's release protocol installed in Shortfuse is transferred to Vermin, popping out the rat inside and allowing Shortfuse to blast the armor, rendering it useless. Vermin is finally defeated, but this means that Shortfuse is once again trapped in his shell. Okay, so Shortfuse makes his final appearance in issue 174 in a tense showdown with Robotnik. So at this point, Robotnik is menacing Mobius once again, and he's using a machine that grants him his wish to empower himself at the detriment of planet Mobius. Robotnik has grown in size and power, and Mobius is wilting and dying. Sonic is struggling to deal with the titanic threat, and Shortfuse arrives with blasters ready to help. But Robotnik proves too strong and easily overwhelms everyone. Tekno advises Shortfuse to try hooking himself up to the wish-granting machine that Robotnik used to suck up Mobius's life force. Shortfuse does, and manages to reverse the flow of the energy, revitalizing Mobius while shrinking Robotnik. The sheer power of all of this is too much for the Cybernik to take, however, and Shorty's armor blows up in the process. Shorty is once again free for good. After a long and arduous battle against Robotnik, Shorty the Squirrel is free, and Shortfuse is no more. That was the last we'd see of Shortfuse in the comic. He had a uniquely vulnerable personality and some really cool abilities. A great combination. Shortfuse was pretty much the sole creation of Lou Stringer, one of the comic's greats. Stringer shared some early concept art of the character on Twitter a few years back, showing a more tubby and squirrely design for Shortfuse. I'm glad they continued to work on the design because Shortfuse's final look with the red and black details is iconic. One detail that Stringer has confirmed after the comic ended is that Tekno and Shortfuse have a little soft spot for each other, but it was never made too explicit in the comic in case it alienated younger audiences. That's quite funny. It's kind of the opposite of what happened over in the Archie comic books. But looking back, there were plenty of subtle signs that Tekno and Shortfuse had a little thing going on. Talking of Archie, in 2004 Shortfuse makes a little cameo in the background of a single panel as Sonic explains about the de-robotization of Mobians at the hands of a race of aliens. That's a really cool nod. I believe a couple of other characters, including Tekno, also made small cameo appearances in the Archie comics too. Shortfuse, Amy, and Tekno could travel between different dimensions, so it's not out of the question to suggest that the universes of Fleetway and Archie were linked in some way, but that's just crazy headcanon. Sonic the Comic ended its run in 2002 but it's unofficially continued as an online comic written and illustrated entirely by fans. Shortfuse received a new suit of armour over there if you're dying for a little more Shorty the Squirrel. What do you think of this Shortfuse Mark III? The one thing that's surprising is, despite being the most requested Fleetway character for me to cover, there isn't really any cool fan projects out there involving Shortfuse. There doesn't seem to be any Shortfuse mods for anything, for example, including Sonic Roboblast 2, which has mods for pretty much every Sonic character. When you search Google for Shortfuse, he's only the second result. A man can only hope that Shortfuse will get his day in the sun at some point in the future. Thanks for joining me for this one, it was incredibly nostalgic for me. If you want more Sonic videos or more Fleetway videos specifically, check out one of these handy playlists. Thanks for watching and hopefully, I'll see you next time.